aware of just all the devastation that's going on there. And so I think now more than ever, our hearts go out to you and the people of Ukraine as this awful, awful war continues. So I know I sent you some questions, but is there anything that you want to just say, before we dive into the questions, a little bit more introductory about your background? I've certainly shared that you are the CEO of Eurostique, the tech company that Sal's company has been working with. But what more do you want, especially new people on the call, to know about?
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for the support, for the nice words. So I'm Ukrainian a citizen living in Ukraine, and reading a lot about what's happening here in the country. And I have many friends that in army right now that's been conscripted. So you can imagine, being Ukrainian, you are fully into these events, no matter how close you are to the war, but you just cannot be separated from this big historical moment, tragedy, and this war. So I spend a lot of time, as I said, reading, getting different kind of news information here. I see a lot of information circulating both in Ukraine and in Russia, in US. So I try to kind of understand what is truth, what is not, what is the propaganda, because the interesting fact about being in war is there are lots of propaganda from pretty much from both sides, right? From our country to keep people motivated, to keep people kind of committed, and from Russia to which is more interesting because they have propaganda on us to lose hope. And they also have different propaganda on our partners and countries like US to kind of stop the support and other stuff. So this is very interesting for me, just to follow, to read different kind of research information, how they do that. And I'm happy to be here with you once every month, and just share the updates and answer your questions, and just spread awareness of what the life really is. And it's kind of when I check your media, it's mainly just shown all the tragedies and destruction. But even though this is a huge war, the fight is happening on a kind of eastern part of the country. So 50 miles from the war zone, people are living, and everything is kind of, I wouldn't say okay, but you would have pretty much the infrastructure available, right? So you would have post services, you will have supermarkets, you would have, like everything like usually, but just from time to time you have rockets hitting somewhere in your area randomly. And that's kind of, that's what I see the big difference from what it happens and to how you see it. Maybe not all of you, but I mean, when I check your news outlets, usually all the destructive images and destroyed buildings circulating, like that's the whole of the country. But that's pretty much the front line. I'm happy to jump into questions. So we might go by the questions you shared, or maybe you want to start in a different order.
Yeah, I'm going to make just a couple of other introductory remarks, because a few people have joined the call since I made them previously, and that is, we are recording this call today so that we can post it to the website, which then has it on the YouTube channel. What I found is that there actually are many people who end up going to the YouTube site to see the video. So if you're participating in this call, you agree that it will be recorded. Secondly, typically we save the last 10 to 15 minutes of the call for questions from the group. So if you have any questions, we will get to them. And lastly, though I am identified as Estelle in the video because I am using her computer, I am Susan Kane. So with that, Yvonne, I did want to switch the order of the first two questions. The first one that I want to talk about is conscription, because that kind of most closely relates to you and certainly our connection to you and Ukraine, but it's through you. So conscription, a new law was introduced in April or May requiring every man between 25 or 60 to log in their details. And we've been reading about how people are, just hiding to not get taken by the conscription forces and such. How much of that is, are you feeling like at risk? And, the people that work for you, and just in general, talk to us about that, please.
Yeah, just a little bit of the context, how conscription works here. It's still pretty much the legacy of the Soviet conscription model. And during the Soviet times, each citizen would have a address where you're register address. And during Soviet times, you were not able to change locations without changing the register address in the kind of government office or whatever. So let's say you live in one city, you move to another city, maybe even for a week, you would have to go and change your address. And that was done for kind of limiting people movement. So people from villages were not able just to go and stay in the city. It was like as soon as police checks your papers and they see you register somewhere in the village, you would be sent back and you were maybe even to the prison, etc. So that was pretty harsh, and the movement was limited in the Soviet. And in that system, it was convenient to do the conscription in the way where you just have a list of address, registered address where people live. You just go to their home and hand them the conscription notice to those who have some military experience. And we have similar kind of system in Ukraine with handling the conscription notice. But since the Soviet Union collapsed, there is absolutely no tracking where people travel, where people live. So most of the people, they go from the parents' house, they go to the university, they live in other places. They just never change this registration because it's no longer needed. The Ukraine is not limiting this movement as Soviet Union was. So I would say the majority of people don't live in the places where government thinks you live because you have some kind of birth certificate with some parents' house address or whatever. So when they want to conscript you in the army, they go to this address and you are not there. Like most of the people don't live with parents. And that's a big problem because you can just live in different place and they officially are not able to conscript you because they only can conscript you if you are at that address that you are registered. So basically, if I know I'm registered, like, for example, if I know I'm registered at my parents' house, I can just not show up there, and there is a small risk I will be conscripted because they can only conscript me in that address. So that's what many people that want to avoid the service, they would do. They would just not show up in the place where they're registered. So it's kind of harder to get conscripted. That's one of the flaws of this kind of old system. And the new law, they changed the rules that instead of the army conscription officer chasing people, which is very resourceful, because people not living on that registered addresses, they made the rule that you have to go and update your data, where you live, your phone number, your email. And if you don't do that, there will be like big fines and so they turn around the play here, that it's no longer kind of available because you can be stopped somewhere in the street and they will ask you, show us the paper that you have updated military data, and if you don't, they would give you a huge fine. And maybe even take you to the conscription office. So that's what was changed, right? The conscription was in place all the time, all for the last 2.5 years since we have the full-scale invasion. The conscription was in place. It was just not it was losing effectiveness with this old system, because the first wave of conscription was covered by the volunteers that, like the first, the war started, many people went to the conscription offices voluntarily, and they conscripted like 500,000 people in a few months, and that was enough. Now they need they continue conscripting, and suddenly this old law would not work, this old system would not work for the reason I just described. So now they just changed the rule of conscription. So it's actually not the start of some new wave of conscription, it just changed the rule of conscription, that you have to go and update your data. If you don't do it and you been stopped somewhere on the street, you can be stopped for speeding, or you can be stopped just by the police, and they check your data and they see you have not updated your military, registration data. So they would either give you a big fine, or they would just bring you to the conscription office, and that's pretty much sure means you will be conscripted right away. So that's kind of the change, and it's happening. This law was applied in the mid of May, and by mid of July, you have this 2 months period where they give people to go and update their data, and after mid July, they would start actually making these fines for men that not keeping data updated. Regarding me personally, I have updated mine last week, and but I have I don't know how to translate. I have like a booking from the service because I run business. I have to renew it every couple of months, and if some rules change and if they don't prolong this for business kind of people, there might be way for me to go and serve. So there is like right now I'm more or less safe for couple of next months, and there are lots of different categories that have this. You can have this. We call it like booking from going to serve because you're doing something else. For example, if you are some critical infrastructure worker, some, for each industry, there is a percentage of staff that businesses can book. So for example, if you work on some critical infrastructure, up to 100% can be avoiding service if this is not critical. And critical is, again, if you're doing some, as I said, infrastructure work, or I don't know, you are maintaining electricity or some equipment. If you're not in a critical industry, businesses might get like 50% quota for booking people, or 20%. So that's how it works. And but these rules change, because there is. The war is evolving. There is always some holes in the system that people try to use to kind of avoid service. So they have to rewrite some laws and make it more concrete, more describe in more terms how it should work in practice. So it's kind of ongoing process. I wouldn't say it's too bad. I wouldn't say it's like police state, as someone wants to put. It's just the country in the middle of the biggest war since World War II, and our population is like a few times smaller than Russian. So yeah, of course, it's gonna be more visible for us when you conscript some amount of people than for Russians. Even though, according to all estimates, they lose more men on the war, but still they have just 2 times more population. So it's kind of still, as I said, still visible here when you have just less men on the streets. Yeah, so I hope I answered.
Okay, well, I think that's another good example of kind of why we do these calls, kind of what the headlines say. And we thought, they're going to be knocking at your door, and all of those that work for you, and be conscripted any day potentially. And especially when we hear too about the troops are tired and depleted, and they need new recruits for the war. But we are glad to know that you continue to be able to run your business and have those that work for you.
And there is a big factor of conscription, and how it goes is morale of the population. So when we were at the beginning of the war, a lot of volunteers went to conscript. And then when we were liberating like Kherson area and Kharkiv area, a lot of people were enthusiastic. And then when we were, last year was announced counteroffensive that failed, numbers dropped significantly, so motivation fell down. And then there was a delay with supplies from partners. And Russia uses these moments, they just press full on propaganda. As soon as, like US delays something, they just throw millions on propaganda here about we've been left aside, now we're all gonna die, we're all like doom and gloom, and it means that more and more people try to avoid the conscript. So it goes like ups and downs, right? And it's very obvious how the battlefield situation and kind of global geopolitical situation influence people morale in joining army, because there is always ways that people can navigate. So there are, as I said, there are these categories that you can, for example, you have 3 kids, right? If you have 3 kids, you're not being conscripted because it's considered more expensive for a country to lose you and then support your 3 kids, then you better stay home, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you are receiving your PhD or pretty much higher education, which is higher than the level that you have. So if I have bachelor's, if I start my master's degree, I cannot be conscripted. If I have master's, but then start my doctorate degree, I cannot be conscripted. But if I have doctorate and I start another doctorate, I can be conscripted because it's considered not the next level, but the same level. So you can imagine many people, like the number of students growing rapidly. A lot of men of age like 45, 50 years try to start their higher education. And like I saw the statistics, like we used to have some number of students per year. Now the applicants is like 10 times more than, and this is kind of legal ways because, you can legally have, you can avoid service if you are getting the higher education. But of course, many people try to do, or if you have 2 kids, many families, have a third one. So the man is not going to army and there is no this risk. So they might not have this cert, which is kind of, I don't know, is it ethical or not? But, there are some families that were okay with 2 kids, not planning the third one, but they're now having the third kid because they understand the war is going to take a while and it's better if man is kind of secured from risking his life. So there are a lot of this, as I call it, legal ways, which might not be always ethically, correct. There is always some kind of illegal things, like people try to cross the border somewhere in the mountains to other country and leave, or people bribe some doctor that writes down that you have, I don't know, like schizophrenia or whatever, and you are not applicable for service. There are also these things happen, right? Because when you have a percentage of people that not willing to go and serve, there will always be, some people that willing to take some money and come up with some medical record that you are sick or whatever. But the government is kind of making this more and more complicated. So like at the beginning, for example, this example with a doctor that writes you something that you are sick. At the beginning of the war, it was just one doctor can decide it. Now, if there is some serious issue with your health, you need to go through multiple kind of different hospitals to verify that you actually have some serious disease or something. So it's kind of harder to bribe everyone, right? So that's just the example. It also happens. It's not a massive percentage, but you hear stories like that. And as I said, some of that is like shameful, but legally correct ways. I like enter the next level of your higher education, try to get into some post doctorate or doctorate program, and it gives you some security. For some people, that just is illegal ways to cross the border or something. It also happens. It's part of this massive realities.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Well, let's switch gears and tell us kind of the realities of what's happening in Kharkiv. And I don't know, hopefully I pronounced that right or close to it, but for the benefit of those on the call that may not know, it's actually it's Ukraine's second largest city, and it's 5 miles away from the Russian border. So they have instituted direct offensives and attacks on Kharkiv and a nearby smaller city that the population went from 17,000 to 300, for example. What's the level of concern that Russia may be successful in taking over that area of the country?
I just want to share the screen just to show you where it is and what's happening. So this is the map of Ukraine, and I'm here, so you can see it's like here's the Poland. So I'm like 1,000 miles from the war zone. Is Kiev, and the blue areas is what we already liberated. So this is the Kiev offensive, and this is the Kharkiv offensive, and this is Kherson. So that's what we already liberated. And this one is like occupied. So Kharkiv, I'm just gonna go zoom. Sorry. Kharkiv is here, and you can see it's like very close to the Russian border. It's like 50 miles to Russian border. And this new offensive actually happens here. You see these two red areas that they just crossed the border. And the problem with Kharkiv is the second biggest city, is 2 million people. And it's very close to Russia. So it's pretty much cheap for them to terrorize this. They can shoot whatever. You know, a lot of stuff can fly 50 miles. It's a very short distance for the war. So even if they're not conquering the city, they just terrorizing 2 million people city, and it's really hard to defend because you can have, you know, like Patriots that you gave us, but one shot is like $2 million, and it makes sense for Kiev because they can shoot only like longer range ballistic missiles to Kiev, and they cannot shoot many of them. But to Kharkiv, they can shoot whatever flies, and they can shoot like lots of cheap artillery shells that just fly this distance. And if you're going to shoot $2 million or $5 million Patriot rockets, there are not enough rockets in the world for these Patriots to intercept everything. So this is a problem because it's being terrorized. So what we do, and what finally happened, that US allowed us to shoot Russian territory with your weapon, because it's not possible to defend this city just with air defense. As I said, these artillery shots, they cost like tens of thousands of dollars, and air defense would cost millions. But now we can shoot them their territory, and we shoot their bases, and their bases are somewhere here. So it's kind of becoming harder for them to fly and to keep anything close to the border that can shoot at Kharkiv. And it started working. So now there are not that many attacks. There are still a lot, but not as it was before. And they still keep a couple of areas occupied here. And there is one city, Vovchansk, here. But that's like super close to the border, and geography here is it's really hard to defend. It's like in a down area, so you really hard to defend this area. So our troops just withdrew, and we just shoot them from above with whatever we can. I don't believe that Kharkiv can be circled or conquered, and I don't think that's the goal for Russians. Their goal is just to terrorize this big city and just not make it not livable. And our goal is to shoot as many as kind of areas here that contribute to this offensive, and to knock out their artillery units and air defense units and other units. So that's the thing. From the positive note, this attack that they started didn't gave them much, but it gave us, and it gave US finally the decision to let us use the weapons on Russian soil. because it's kind of was not possible to defend these other ways. As I said, with just air defense, it's just not going to work because it's a very short distance and they can just throw at it whatever flies, and it's very expensive to defend. Right now, it's more or less stable here. There is not much happening in this area. I mean, not much positive for Russia, no breakthrough. So they still keep some parts of these territories, but that's not big chunks of territories.
Okay. Well, that's been very helpful to see that on the map and just to understand the kind of strategy and the changes that have happened, allowing the U.S. provided weapons to go into Russia. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Another of the things that we, read about here, or I read about, was that, half of the electricity and infrastructure has been destroyed. Is that accurate? I mean, I think back to the early days of the war, you were, constantly using generators and things, and then it seemed like things were stable. But has that reverted?
Yeah, so they've been hitting hard infrastructure all around the country again, and everyone was expecting that at the beginning of the war because that's where the consumption is higher. At the beginning of the winter, but they actually started this massive attack at the end of the winter this time, and they knocked out a lot of infrastructure. And I don't know, like these numbers, what percentage of that, it's a fog of war. I don't think anyone is telling the truth, but we have blackouts, we have schedule for the electricity, even for us here in Lviv, like 1,000 miles from the front lines. Even though we have a direct lines from Europe, we still have blackouts. And I just want to show you. I just translated this. This is our schedule for my house. So I just put it in Google Translate to translate. So we are in this my area group 2.2, and this is how it looks like. So we have Monday to Sunday and 2-hour slots, and then green one we have electricity. This orange we do not have electricity, and white we might have. So it's like 50-50. We might have blackout in these areas depending on some other factors. So this is what we have. So today we didn't have, it's like from 9 to 1 p.m. So it was actually from 9, and then we are not going to have electricity from 9 to 1 a.m. this evening, and that's how it looks every day. So it's kind of livable, even with these blackouts. When you have a schedule, it's okay. In some areas, in the closer to the front line, I mean, like, even like in the central Ukraine, you would have something like vice versa. You would have like, this would be the hours you have electricity. So maybe like 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day, you have electricity, and the rest you don't have electricity. So that's kind of less fun. And yeah, and that's what we have. So we are now investing a lot into smaller electricity infrastructure units. This kind of practice, having huge facilities, might be efficient for the infrastructure, but it's easy target for the enemy. They knock out like 20 units, and the whole country is suffering. Luckily, they are not hitting the nuclear power plants. We have a couple of them, and that's giving us a lot of securities. But that's that's not enough. You need to have other sources that can be balanced quickly, because for the nuclear energy, you cannot increase and slow down this quickly. That's just, doesn't have this this flexibility. That's why other sources are important, because they might be more flexible. And in energy infrastructure, it's important to have this balance depending on how much people consume, so you can add, reduce electricity. So that's how it is here at the moment, and that's summer, and that's not really too hot summer. It just everyone is kind of scared what's going to happen by the winter, but we'll see. Still some time. People buying some kind of batteries to their houses, generators. Business-wise, I wouldn't say we're much affected because we have big power generator in our office. It's all kind of gas or diesel, and a lot of businesses have these small generators on the street. When you walk on the street and during the blackout, you just hear this noise and this smell from this pollution, because these generators, they usually really this kind of smell of the gas and diesel. But also we are in a tech business. We have laptops and we have, I don't know, like internet. You don't need a lot of batteries to power your laptop. You can buy relatively cheap batteries to power your laptop. The complicated, if you have a factory and you have big machinery, you cannot just power this with some power banks, and you cannot power this with even with a small generators. You need to buy these big, expensive generators. So for these businesses, it's harder, much harder. For us, as I said, we just have laptops, and my Mac would keep me like half a day. So as soon as I have internet, and internet is working pretty stable. We have fiber everywhere. We have pretty good coverage. We might use the cellular connection when there are blackouts. But when you have Wi-Fi, when you have internet in your house, it's not that critical. You can call people via WhatsApp or whatever. So it's not too bad for the business. It's actually not visible. It's more like a personal discomfort that you have. And during the summer, again, it's not that bad because you have sun till 10 p.m. In the winter, it's very depressing when you have sun goes down at 6 p.m. and you don't have electricity, and you have lack of vitamin D anyways during the winter, and then you have lack of electricity. It's kind of much more depressing. So yeah, let's see how it goes.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to condense the next two questions that I sent you, Ivan, into kind of one so that we can leave 10 or 15 minutes for any questions from the attendees. But talk to us about the kind of the value or and shortcomings potentially of the support that you're receiving from the rest of the world, whether it's the support from the recent G7 summit. When we left off a couple months ago, the U.S. had finally just approved the $60 billion package. What are the implications of that as far as the war and any thought of the end of this war?
So implications of this is huge, not just because of the money package, but actually U.S. has probably the biggest arsenal of weapons that you can start sending right away, and that's what happened. And that helped stop Kharkiv offensive for Russians. So the map that I showed you, that attack on Kharkiv, it was happening. It was like the front line was collapsing. One of the reasons was lack of ammunition. So from what I hear now, there is these packages that U.S. gave right after this bill was accepted. We just have more and more equipment, and it helped us stop the Russian advance, and it also helped us knock out their capabilities on their territory. So every night now we are shooting on their territory deeper and deeper. So we have our drones that we created and we're using, but they're not that powerful. They don't have this big explosive powers. But the rockets that US and other partners given us, we are hitting all around Crimea. Crimea is heavy military area for Russia. It's not just kind of tourist place or something. They have lots of expensive and kind of high-tech facilities in there, and we're now able to cover every part of Crimea with weapons we get from partners. So that's a huge difference for this war. And we see Crimea as a kind of jewel of winning this war. We don't need to win this on the eastern part with Donetsk or Luhansk. we need to knock them out from Crimea, and they will run away from everywhere, because Crimea is very strategic for them and for us as well. So I think that's a huge benefit, and we just see these reports every day. So yesterday, like this night, I just show you one more screen. So this night we hit this facility in Crimea, and that's a huge kind of old Soviet. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes, that's good.
That's a NIP-16. It's a kind of old Soviet communication base in Crimea. Russia has like 4 of them, and that's 4 of them is actually helping them communicate with outer space, with orbit, everything that's above orbit. They use these 4 stations, and we knock out one of them this night. So remember, Russia were blackmailing US about putting nukes in the space and other crazy things. So we just knock out like 1/4 of their communication capabilities, and this is huge, and this is not easy to replace. This is not easy to reroute the satellites that they would use against us and against our partners. So that just happens this night. This is just one of examples, and so it's kind of very significant, and we still would want to have more support from partners, but on the positive note, it's kind of obvious that the support is not stopping and it's not slowing down. Yeah, it's not on that big pace that we can win the war easily. Like a lot of risk mitigation still happens on the West, and a lot of this Russian agenda is still being discussed in the West about how to keep Putin safe his face. So this is still happening, but still, amount of support we get for these 3 years is huge, and it's not slowing down. And Europe is more and more involved in that. So Europe done a lot of reforms for the last few years, and they reopened a lot of military factories, etc. It's kind of easier for US to give help because you were always more kind of active in all these facilities. You had everything up and running, and Europe was slowly shutting down year by year. So all this critique from US politicians that Europe should do more is actually happening. It's maybe not that visible on the actual amount of equipment they can give right away, but amount of change that they made from 2022 to now in terms of reopening their facilities is just huge. So I think that's a big step, both for us and for European security, and it gives us some reassurance that even if by some chance that people are talking that if Trump wins and stops supporting us, there's still a big chance that we will have continuous support from Europe, and that keeps us kind of motivated. So it all combined doing really well, and I mean, we would want more, but it's still huge amount of support we get, and this is very obvious on the battlefield. And my personal estimate is if this continues this year and next year, we might be close to some kind of negotiation desire from Putin next year, because they're losing a lot of. So this example that I showed you, this is expensive equipment, and they're losing. We'll be hitting their early warning nuclear systems. Few of them within the last months. This is also very rare and expensive. So, for example, if someone wants to nuke Russia, they now have less eyes to or radars for that, and we are hitting because we can. And I mean, it's becoming more and more expensive for them. The more this war takes, the more weapons we get to, and the more weapons we actually build ourselves to shoot far into Russian, deep into Russia, and that just makes it more and more expensive for them. So yeah.
Okay, great. We have just under 10 minutes left, and I'd like to open the call up to anybody who would like to raise a question. You can take yourself off of mute, or I see staff from Heart Zones has raised a hand. You want to start? Oh, is it that Sal? Okay. See, you're not identified as Sal either.
No, I'm not. I'm Perry.
So, okay, go ahead, Per.
So we understand from our history that you are the breadbasket. We don't hear very much about farming in your area, and the part of have the Russians attacked the farming portion of your country?
So we are a main exporter of different types of grains. So it's corn, it's wheat. We are not much into like kind of animal farming or so. I wouldn't say we're a big player in that. We are more into wheat and corn and other cultures. So they've been hitting the how are these facilities where you store this grain elevators or whatever. So they would hit that a lot. And if you remember, there was a deal with Russia that they would allow the export this kind of grain corridors. So that's kind of interesting fact. And let me just share the screen one more time very quickly to address this. So this is the kind of south of, this is the Black Sea, and this is Odessa, and this is Bulgaria here. So, and this is this kind of Snake Island, the one famous that was the first year of the war. It's important to control this kind of goods. So this kind of grain corridor, it would happen from here and to Bulgarian kind of waters, because Russia would not hit here in Bulgarian waters. So it was a problem for us to do this route, because they will be all over the Black Sea. Now with this kind of sea drones, we knocked them out completely of the Black Sea, not just from here. We are now making the ferries from Ukraine to Georgia, which is here, somewhere here on the south. So you can imagine we're now going this way, and we don't, give a damn about them, because they just hid all their warships in this Azov Sea because of our sea drones. So that's kind of how the country without navy is able to fight Russians with a modern kind of remote control sea drones, and this is the result. So we used to struggle the grain export for this kind of route. Now we are doing ferries to Georgia up here. So we completely reopened for ourselves this. Russia was kind of blocking that at some moment, and we threw them away from this area completely. So we're now freely going to the Bosphor, to Turkey, and selling our grain. So what they would do, they would attack a lot of this kind of grain facilities that store the grain. It's not really effective to attack the field or whatever, because it's big territory. But they still kind of try to. So I guess the tactics of this grain producer change. They just not store everything in one facility, as well as we're not storing in this kind of oil and gas big facilities that you would see from the space, because Russia would also hit that. So we are now getting into more storing smaller parts around the country, and that's the thing. And being more kind of mobile and being more kind of moving. So instead of keeping static, let's say, oil and lubricants or whatever into static millions of barrels equipment, we would just keep it on trains, and whenever there is an ailerate, train would just move a few miles, and that's what happened with this whole infrastructure gain is happening everywhere in the country right now, because we cannot intercept all their rockets, but they don't have they cannot change this rocket trajectory as soon as they shoot. So they program and they shoot. So when we see something is flying in a particular direction, we just change the location of things. We just sit on the jets. We just move the jets, like to a neighbor airfield, and they just hit on the empty spots. The same with the oil and gas and other stuff. So yeah. So that's why I mentioned the problem with energy infrastructure, because we had this big energy infrastructure object, and it's hard to change this infrastructure very quickly. Now we are building new one because this got destroyed, and we are putting more smaller units that it's kind of harder for them to hit and knock out the whole region just hitting one target. That's the thing. I hope I answered.
You did. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Great additional information. I think we can do one more question before we wrap it up at the top of the hour. Sal.
I get lots of questions. I want to ask Ivan how he's doing emotionally, because this is a people to people we've been talking a lot about. But Ethan, it's your first time here. If you want to ask a question, go ahead.
Oh, no, by all means, please go ahead. You raised your hand first. I can ask next month. It's okay.
Okay, well, thanks. So, emotionally, we know there's the physical side and then there's the other side. But Ivan, how you doing? And it's been a long.
You just get used to that. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. You just get used to that. You just get used to the big unknown in your life. You just get used that security is not the same as it was 2 years ago. So it's a big chance that you can be conscripted. There is a chance that something can fall on your house and you're all gonna die. You just kind of get used to it. You don't take it that personally. And people used to live like that for thousands of years. You would not have this almost a century without wars. It used to be normal. People would be fighting and dying and would having a terrible disease. This kind of last 80 years made us, I don't know, relaxed or weak. And we look on that as, how we survive these terrible moments. But as a human being, we used to live like that for centuries. There used to be wars, there used to be hungers, there used to be disasters and diseases, etc. So you just kind of get used to that. You try to, you hope your close one not get affected. You hope your friends gonna return back home healthy and with nice stories. But you just accept that you cannot control everything and you just let it go. At some point, it's kind of painful because you try to control, you're trying to build a fortress around you, like financial stability, physical security, all this stuff that people are chasing throughout their lives. At some moment, you just, in events like that, you just realize you just cannot control everything. You just have to let it go and continue living your life and enjoying that and spending time with close ones, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's not all that bad. You just kind of shift something in your head, but it's not all that bad, and you kind of get used to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well,
so I think I can still answer a question.
Okay.
Okay, last one, because I do want to respect the hour time that we put on this. But Ethan, is it something that Ivan can perhaps give us a quick response to, and we could always dive into it more deeply next week or next month?
Just as we can pick this up next month, no worries. My question is, I'm just a school teacher in the state of Michigan, USA. I try to spread awareness about what's happening in Ukraine, and I have been since 12 in the morning when I saw that Russia had invaded the country. I try to donate where I can, when I can. Is there anything more I can do as a young citizen to, I don't know, increase the support or just the awareness of what's happening in Ukraine right now? Is there anything more I could do?
I think the big part of this war is there is a lot of Russian narrative kind of globally, because Russia is a bigger country. They used to be empire. I think they're still empire. So all this kind of Dostoevsky sympathizers, and you would have it in schools, and you would not have our history, you would not have our literature, because it was all suppressed by Russians. If you are a young poet, Ukrainian poet in Soviet Union, you're just going to be shot dead for writing just in Ukrainian language. So of course, somewhere in US, you're not going to heard about him in school. So I think the big part is start kind of learning, or just knowing our history, knowing our culture. I used to share the Timothy Snyder, he's a history teacher in Harvard. He has a really nice lectures on YouTube about Ukrainian history. And I guess he's teaching Ukrainian history in Harvard. Is it Harvard or something else? But he has a really good one, and I read kind of historian reviews from Ukraine that they said he's really, really accurate in his kind of history of this region. It's not just about Ukraine, it's about this region. So I would really love if you can, watch content like that and share it with your network and just see how this kind of history of this region was showed to you from the Russian lens for many, many years. And it was imperialistic lens, and they would show it as, they're the brightest mind, etc. But they were actually living on top of kind of this slavered nations that they had in Soviet Union. They would just capture all the resources, all the brains from here, and present it to you as their as their own. And that's what happened. And now when you kind of when you read people like Elon Musk or someone, they understand Russia because they heard something about Russia in school. They heard about Dostoevsky, they heard about Gagarin, but they never heard about Ukraine, part of that. So it's kind of, they get more sympathy to Russia because they just more familiar for them. And this is the big problem. And I think this is the big, it's very important for us to win this war in the minds of Western people, that Ukraine was actually around for many years. Yeah, it was suppressed. Yeah, it was not independent, but it was not invented by Lenin in 20th century, as Putin says. And I think if you can just follow this, I guess Saul just sent that. Yeah, Saul, this is the one that I mentioned, Timothy Snyder?
Yeah, it's a lecture series that I watched that was just fabulous. It started with the Vikings. I didn't know they invaded you all. I mean, all the people that have invaded Ukraine, and you are right. I took Russian history in college, and all it was about how great. It never mentioned Ukraine. It was how it's so slanted in favor of the mindset of Americans. So yeah, it's a great. You should all watch it.
And I think part of the value of these monthly calls, we certainly welcome those Ethan and Peter that are here for the first time. We appreciate all of those of you who return month after month. But it's also the ripple effect of the things that we learn on these calls and then share with the people that we know that, can't attend the calls, but are very, very interested. So I thank you all. And this is just kind of, one way of supporting Ivan and Ukraine in the ways that he just described. So we'll look forward to continuing the conversation next month.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you.
Okay. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye.